Alien student flirts too hard, and her human professor is struggling to resist. First contact. Professor Nolan Reed adjusted his holographic display for the third time as students filed into the lecture hall. The beginning of each semester at Celestial Academy brought a familiar mix of eager humans and various alien species from across the Galactic Alliance. After 7 years of teaching advanced astrophysics, Nolan prided himself on maintaining professional composure regardless of his students' origins. "Excuse me, Professor Reed, I was told to have you sign my transfer approval?" The voice carried a melodic quality with subtle harmonic undertones that immediately identified it as non-human. Nolan looked up from his preparations to find himself facing a Nerissan, the first he'd ever encountered in person. She stood slightly shorter than an average human woman, her blue-green skin catching the light with an almost pearlescent quality. Her silver eyes, large and expressive, met his with intelligent curiosity. Dark teal hair fell in loose waves past her shoulders, adorned with small ornaments that resembled tiny starbursts. "You must be Talea Vex," Nolan said, recalling the late addition to his class roster, the exchange student from Nerissa. "Yes," she replied, with a smile that revealed slightly pointed teeth. "Thank you for accommodating me in your already full class. The gravitational anomalies you're researching parallel phenomena in my homeworld's deep oceans." As she handed him her digital tablet, their fingers brushed briefly. Nolan felt an unexpected warmth spread from the point of contact. Perhaps a natural biological reaction to Nerissan physiology, he told himself. "Your academic record is impressive," he noted, scrolling through her credentials. "Highest honors at the Oceanic Science Institute. Published research on quantum fluctuations in liquid environments." "We approach physics differently on Nerissa," Talea explained, leaning slightly closer than human students typically would. "We experience scientific principles through immersion rather than observation." The subtle scent of something like sea salt and exotic flowers entered Nolan's awareness. He cleared his throat and straightened his posture. "Well, I look forward to your perspective in class discussions. Please take a seat. We're about to begin." Throughout the lecture, Nolan found his attention repeatedly drawn to Talea. While other students took notes or occasionally looked confused, she watched him with unwavering attention. Her silver eyes reflected the holographic star systems he projected. When she asked questions, they were incisive, challenging assumptions that even Nolan sometimes took for granted. After class, while other students hurried out, Talea approached his desk again. "Professor Reed, on Nerissa, students traditionally offer mentors a gift at first meeting." She placed a small crystalline object on his desk. "This is a resonance stone from our deepest trenches. It captures and amplifies the vibrations of its environment." Before Nolan could respond appropriately, she added, with a subtle tilt of her head, "I've programmed it to my personal frequency. If you hold it and think of me, I'll feel its resonance wherever I am." She turned and walked away, leaving Nolan staring at the shimmering stone and wondering if he had just misinterpreted a cultural exchange or received something far more personal. Either way, he couldn't deny the unsettling realization that for the first time in his teaching career, he was already looking forward to tomorrow's class for reasons entirely unrelated to astrophysics. Academic gravity. 2 weeks into the semester, Nolan found himself staying later than usual in his research lab. The quiet hum of quantum analyzers provided a soothing backdrop as he reviewed stellar data from the Academy's orbital telescope. So absorbed was he in the patterns of a particularly unusual pulsar that he didn't notice Thalia's arrival until her reflection appeared in his screen. "Professor Reed," she said, her voice causing a subtle vibration in the resonance stone he'd taken to keeping in his pocket. "I hoped I might find you here." Nolan turned, maintaining what he hoped was a professional smile. "Miss Vex, the undergraduate lab's closed an hour ago." I'm not here for the undergraduate facilities, she replied, moving closer with that fluid grace characteristic of Neresans. I've been approved for independent research, and Professor Keller suggested you might advise me. She placed a datapad on his desk, her fingers lingering on its surface. I'm studying gravitational waves from binary neutron stars, but with a Neresan approach. Nolan raised an eyebrow as he reviewed her proposal. It was genuinely brilliant, combining traditional astrophysics with Neresan sensory perception theory. You propose to detect patterns human instruments miss by translating gravitational waves into haptic feedback? He asked, genuinely intrigued. On Nerissa, we perceive the universe through touch as much as sight, she explained, her silver eyes holding his gaze longer than necessary. Our people can feel variations in pressure and vibration that your instruments struggle to detect. Their discussion extended into the evening, theories and equations flowing between them with increasing enthusiasm. Nolan found himself captivated not just by her ideas, but by the way she expressed them, hands moving expressively, eyes brightening when he understood concepts unique to her world. You're the first human who hasn't dismissed our perceptual science's mysticism, she said, suddenly closer than Nolan remembered her being a moment before. Science is about observation regardless of which senses we use, he replied, becoming acutely aware of the narrowing space between them. Your proposal is sound. I'd be happy to advise your research. Baelia's smile held something beyond academic satisfaction. We'll need to work closely together. My species learns through proximity and shared experience. The Academy has protocols for student-faculty research partnerships, Nolan said, retreating slightly. Of course, she replied, the bioluminescent patterns beneath your skin pulsing briefly. Though, on my world, the most profound discoveries happen when we move beyond rigid structures. After she left, Nolan sat alone in his lab, the resident stone warm in his palm. He told himself his racing thoughts were merely excitement about the research possibilities. Yet when he closed his eyes, it wasn't equations he saw, but silver eyes and blue-green skin that seemed to glow from within. The following weeks established a rhythm to their collaboration. Afternoons in the lab, evenings analyzing data, occasional meals in his office while discussing theoretical physics. Nolan maintained professional boundaries with practiced discipline, though each day made this increasingly difficult. You've never asked about Neresan customs regarding personal relationships, Dahlia noted one evening as they calibrated equipment together. It would be inappropriate to discuss personal matters, Nolan replied, keeping his eyes on the instruments. Even as anthropological study, she asked, her hand briefly covering his on the calibration controls. Our cultures will collaborate better with mutual understanding. The touch lingered just long enough for Nolan to notice the delicate webbing between their fingers and a slight current, almost electrical, that seemed to pass between their skin. Perhaps another time, he managed, withdrawing his hand and missing the knowing smile that briefly crossed Thalia's face as she turned away. Orbital pull. The Academy's orbital observatory hung suspended above Nova Terra, its crystalline domes and extended sensor arrays capturing light from distant galaxies. For xenoastrophysics students, the traditional overnight observation session represented a rite of passage, and for Professor Nolan Reed, typically a routine educational exercise. Tonight was different. Budget cuts had limited the number of faculty supervisors, leaving Nolan alone with just 5 advanced students, including Talia Vex. The Cygnus Nebula is particularly active tonight, Nolan explained as the small group gathered around the main observatory dome. You'll each take 3-hour shifts at different telescope stations. As the night progressed, Nolan rotated between stations, offering guidance and answering questions. The other students eventually retired to the small dormitory section for rest between their shifts, leaving Nolan alone with Talia at the primary telescope. You never sleep during these sessions? She asked, adjusting the quantum resonance filters with remarkable precision.
"Old habit from my research days," he replied, watching how the observatory lights cast blue-violet reflections across her skin. "Some phenomena are too easily missed." Talia nodded, moving aside to show him her findings. "Like this anomaly in the pulsar's rhythm. It matches the theoretical pattern from my research." Nolan leaned closer to examine her data, suddenly aware of her proximity in the dimly lit observatory dome. The air between them seemed charged with something beyond academic interest. "You've identified a gravitational echo," he said, genuinely impressed. "This could validate your entire theory." "I need to feel it more clearly," Talia said, removing a small device from her pocket. "This translator converts the wave patterns to tactile frequencies neurons can interpret." She placed the device between them, and immediately the air filled with subtle vibrations. Nolan watched in fascination as the luminescent patterns beneath Talia's skin responded, flowing and shifting like cosmic tides. "It's beautiful," he said without thinking. "This is how my people experience the universe," she replied softly. "We don't just observe, we resonate with it." Her silver eyes lifted to his. "Would you like to feel it as I do?" Before he could answer, she took his hands and placed them atop the device. The vibrations intensified, and to Nolan's surprise, he felt something. Not just physical tremors, but what seemed like emotional impressions, as though the cosmic waves carried sentiments as well as energy. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Not impossible," Talia corrected, her hand still covering his. "Just beyond your current understanding. On Nerissa, we believe the universe speaks in many languages. Physics is just one of them." The moment stretched between them, reality narrowing to the space they shared beneath the stars. Nolan became acutely conscious of every point of contact between them. Her cool fingers against his warm ones, the subtle current that seemed to pass between their skin. "Talia," he began, voice hoarse with restraint, "there are boundaries. Between teacher and student, between different species, between different perceptions of reality." She leaned closer, her scent like distant oceans and cosmic dust. "Or between what you want and what you think you should want." The observatory dome rotated slowly above them, revealing new constellations through the transparent ceiling. In that moment, suspended among the stars they both studied, Nolan felt the carefully maintained distance between them collapsing like a dying star. "We should check the other telescopes," he said, finally, gently withdrawing his hands. Something like disappointment flickered across Talia's features before she nodded with understanding. "Of course, Professor." As they moved through the dimly lit observatory checking instruments, both were acutely aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. Like binary stars locked in each other's gravitational pull, no longer able to maintain separate orbits.
Gravitational collapse. The annual Stellar Gala represented the Celestial Academy's most prestigious event, where faculty, distinguished alumni, and exceptional students gathered to celebrate achievements in astrophysics. Nolan adjusted his formal attire, a midnight blue suit with subtle constellation patterns woven into the fabric, as he entered the Grand Hall. The Academy's central dome had been transformed for the occasion, holographic stars drifting across the ceiling, while anti-gravity platforms created floating conversation areas throughout the space. Faculty members nodded respectfully as Nolan passed, several congratulating him on his recent publication. "Professor Reed," came a familiar voice behind him. "It seems we exist outside the classroom after all." Turning, Nolan momentarily lost his carefully maintained composure. Talia stood before him in traditional Nerissan formal attire, a flowing garment that seemed to capture and release light with every movement, creating the impression that she was partly formed from liquid starlight. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin pulsed subtly, matching the ambient music's rhythm. Miss Vex, he managed. I wasn't aware students were invited to the gala. Recipients of the Xenophysics Achievement Grant receive invitations, she replied, a subtle smile playing at her lips. I submitted our pulsar research findings. Our findings? Nolan raised an eyebrow. That was your independent project. Based on your guidance, she countered, moving closer. Science advances through collaboration, does it not? Particularly between different perspectives. Before Nolan could formulate a suitably professional response, the Academy Chancellor approached, beaming with approval. Professor Reed, Miss Vex, your joint paper on gravitational perception theory is causing quite a stir. The Interstellar Science Committee is considering funding a dedicated research division. The Chancellor raised his glass in salute. This is precisely the kind of cross-species scientific cooperation the Academy was founded to encourage. As the Chancellor moved on to greet other guests, Nolan found himself alone with Talia in a suddenly crowded room. It appears we're partners now, whether you intended it or not, she said, her silver eyes reflecting the holographic stars above them. You submitted our research without consulting me, Nolan replied, trying to maintain his professional demeanor despite the conflicting emotions rising within him. You submitted what we discovered together, Talia countered. Does it matter who receives credit when the discovery itself is what's important? The traditional gala dance began, with faculty and distinguished guests taking to the central floor where gravity had been subtly altered to give dancers a floating sensation. In Narisan culture, Talia said, her eyes on the dancers, refusing to participate in celebration after a shared achievement is considered deeply offensive. Nolan sighed, recognizing the elegant trap she had created. One dance, he conceded, for cultural diplomacy. On the dance floor, the modified gravity field made their movements seem weightless. Talia moved with natural grace, her body responding to the altered physics with intuitive understanding that most humans struggled to match. Nolan, however, having spent years studying cosmic forces, adjusted his movements to complement hers. You dance like you understand gravity's pull, she observed as they moved together through the starlit space. Understanding forces and resisting them are different matters, Nolan replied, immediately regretting the unintended honesty in his words. Talia's hand tightened slightly in his. Then why resist what you understand so well? The music shifted, the tempo slowing, as the holographic stars above intensified, casting the dancers in ethereal light. Other couples became mere shadows at the periphery of Nolan's awareness as Talia moved closer, the space between them charged with unspoken tension. There are 27 people watching us right now, Nolan said quietly. Are you watching them? She asked, her face tilted toward his. No, I admitted. The dance ended, but neither moved to separate immediately. Around them, the gala continued, but something had fundamentally changed between them. A threshold crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Later, as the celebration wound down, Nolan found himself walking with Talia through the Academy's botanical gardens, the bioluminescent alien flora creating private pools of colored light among the shadows. You've been avoiding me since the observatory, she finally said, stopping beneath a tree with glowing blue leaves. I've been maintaining appropriate boundaries, he corrected. Is that truly what you want? Talia asked, turning to face him directly. We've discovered something together that neither of us could have found alone. Doesn't that suggest other discoveries waiting if we stopped pretending this is merely academic? The resonant stone in Nolan's pocket had grown warm, pulsing in time with Talia's bioluminescent patterns. When he didn't immediately respond, she stepped closer, eliminating the careful distance he had maintained for weeks. On Narissa, we believe that when two beings resonate at complementary frequencies, separating them diminishes both. Her hand rose to his face, cool fingers tracing an invisible line along his jaw. I feel your frequency, Nolan Reed. It harmonizes with mine in ways I've never experienced. The use of his first name broke something in Nolan's resolve. His hand caught hers, but instead of removing it as he had intended, he found himself holding it against his face. This can't happen, he said, his voice betraying him with its roughness. It already is, she replied simply, and closed the remaining distance between them.
New constellation. The Academy's administrative chamber felt unnecessarily formal to Nolan as he sat before the disciplinary committee. Three senior faculty members regarded him with expressions ranging from disappointment to barely concealed interest in the Academy's most discussed recent scandal. "Professor Reed," began Director Elaine Shen, her tone carefully neutral, "your relationship with exchange student Tyalia Vex has been brought to our attention. While no formal complaint has been filed, the Academy has clear policies regarding faculty-student relationships." Nolan nodded, his posture straight despite his inner turmoil. "I understand the purpose of these policies, Director." "Your research with Miss Vex has garnered significant attention," continued Professor Harrington, the elderly astrophysics department head. "The Interstellar Science Foundation is particularly interested in your gravitational perception theories. This complicates matters." "Science progresses regardless of personal circumstances," Nolan replied evenly. Director Chen leaned forward. "We're not here to end your career, Nolan, but choices must be made. The committee offers two options. First, you may end all personal contact with Ms. Vex while maintaining professional supervision of her research through faculty intermediaries. Or second, you may recuse yourself from all academic evaluation of her work, transferring her advisement to another qualified faculty member." The silence that followed felt heavier than any gravitational field Nolan had studied. 3 weeks had passed since the night of the Stellar Gala. 3 weeks of profound connection and increasing scrutiny as rumors spread through the Academy. "I'll need time to consider," he finally said. "You have until tomorrow," Director Shen replied. "The Narisan Embassy has also requested involvement in this matter as it potentially affects interspecies diplomatic protocols." Outside the administrative building, Nolan found Tyalia waiting, her expression unreadable to most humans, but increasingly transparent to him. "They've offered you a choice," she stated rather than asked, as they walked the campus perimeter path, carefully maintaining public distance between them. "How did you know?" "Narisan intuition," she replied with a slight smile. "Also, it's standard procedure in cases like ours." "There are no cases like ours," Nolan said quietly. "That's part of the problem." They reached the observatory hill, overlooking the sprawling Academy campus and the distant shimmering ocean beyond. The setting sun cast everything in golden light, including Tyalia's blue-green skin. "I've received an offer," she said after a moment. "The Interstellar Research Coalition wants me to lead a team exploring gravitational perception across different species. They're establishing a new facility on the neutral colony world Proxima." Nolan felt simultaneous pride and disappointment. "That's a remarkable opportunity. You deserve it." They've also requested a human physicist with expertise in traditional gravitation theory, someone who could bridge the gap between different scientific approaches. They specifically mentioned your name. The implication hung between them, carried on the evening breeze. "You're suggesting I leave the Academy," Nolan said, processing the possibility. "My entire career has been here." "I'm suggesting you consider whether your future lies in teaching what's already known or discovering what isn't. The coalition position includes faculty status at the Proxima Science Academy. You wouldn't be abandoning teaching, just changing which students learn from you." Nolan gazed out at the horizon, where the first stars were becoming visible. "And us? What happens to whatever this is between us?" Tyalia moved closer, no longer concerned with maintaining appearances. "In Narisan culture, when two scientists discover a new phenomenon together, they are forever linked as co-observers of that reality. We've discovered something between us that defies conventional understanding. Doesn't that deserve further study?" Nolan found himself smiling despite the uncertainty ahead. A proper scientist follows the evidence regardless of where it leads. "Even across galaxies?" she asked, her silver eyes reflecting the emerging stars. "Especially then," he replied. The next morning, Nolan entered the administrative chamber with clear purpose. His decision had crystallized during a night spent contemplating not stars, but possibilities. "Professor Reed," Director Shen began, "have you reached a decision regarding the committee's options?" "I have," Nolan replied, placing his faculty credentials on the table. "I'm submitting my resignation from the Celestial Academy, effective at the end of this term." Surprised murmurs circulated among the committee members. "This is unnecessary, Nolan," Professor Harrington protested. "Your work here is valued. I've accepted a research position with the Interstellar Coalition to explore gravitational perception on Proxima Colony." Understanding dawned on Director Shen's face. "With Miss Vex, I presume." "As colleagues," Nolan confirmed, "on equal footing exploring new scientific territory together." Later, as he packed his office under the curious gazes of passing students, Tyelia appeared in his doorway with a data pad in her hands and undisguised joy in her expression. "The Coalition confirmed your appointment," she said, crossing to him. "We leave for Proxima in 3 weeks." Nolan set down the quantum mechanics text he'd been holding and turned to her. "Are we making a mistake?" Tyelia considered this with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Perhaps, but isn't that how discovery works? Stepping into the unknown despite uncertainty." She held out her hand, and within it lay the resonance stone she had given him months ago, now glowing with heightened intensity. 2 frequencies harmonizing across different worlds, creating something neither could produce alone. Nolan took the stone, feeling its familiar warmth. Then, with deliberate intent, he took her hand as well. "To new constellations," he said. Tyelia smiled, the patterns beneath her skin pulsing in time with his heartbeat, and the uncharted spaces between them